Oh, hey, we're already getting compliments on our thumbnail.
Morning, Sergeant Major. All right. Done with that. Let me. This one's right here at work. Webster Hubble. So that's Juicy Smollier on the thumbnail. But Sean said Webster Hubble and Hillary Clinton weren't a thing. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing.
So basically, let's be real. It's kind of a slow news day. Kind of. But I want to talk about a pattern.
Okay.
I want to talk about a pattern on the left where, well, people just don't face consequences.
Okay.
Like, even where they do face consequences, they're mitigated substantially. For example, we all know that where is it? Hillary Clinton absolutely did not lose the election in 2016. Right? In fact, we're allowed to say that it was stolen from her
By Russia.
by Russia. Right? Even in the face of that narrative being completely, legitimately, and quite publicly disproved. Not only was it disproved, it has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt that she was personally, directly responsible for not only conducting, but funding the Russia hoax.
The Steele dossier.
Yep. And here we've got, in an emotional video released Wednesday, former Secretary of State Clinton, this is from MSN too, so, for the first time, publicly delivered the victory speech she had been planning to give on November 16th if she had prevailed over Donald Trump in that year's presidential election. No consequences, right? She just gets to... She's going to pull a Stacey Abrams and just continue to pretend like she won the election that she clearly lost. And then the other one we've got going on here, and I'm going to hit this one before Juicy. This reminds me somewhat of the Waukesha situation, where I believe he's still in custody. I believe the Waukesha guy is still in custody now. He was out on bail when he committed the crime.
Out on bail, out on bail, out on bail,
Yeah, out on bail, out on bail, out on bail. And now he's, I believe, still incarcerated. I don't think they've let him post bail again after this one, have they?
I think he's got like a $5 million bond. I'd have to go back and check, but, he's...
Because I was planning on talking about a couple other things. Waukesha... attacker.
Steve says, how narcissistic can you be? Good grief.
Well, you could be a Democrat. Because, well, I mean, at the very core, what they believe is that they know better how to live your life than you do.
Okay.
Okay, so I just feel like I'm being a monster, demonized. Brooks 39 said during a video. Yes, that's because you are a monster. You murdered a bunch of people.
You're talking about the
That's the Waukesha guy.
Yeah. Yeah. His name is Brooks, by the way.
Yeah. A career criminal and registered child sex offender. You know that that means, right?
That he's been convicted of
Democrat.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, what's he up? Haven't more of his victims died at this point?
Yeah, now.
Yeah.
and then, so, basically minimize consequences. And I'll get back to the Waukesha thing in just a minute. So we see Fox News tree to be relit after fire in Midtown. So this was yesterday, right? This reporting is from this morning at 6:30.
Wait. I don't think relit is the...
I was just thinking that.
I don't think that's the language they want to use here.
But somebody set the tree on fire at the Fox News headquarters. He's been charged with criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, arson, criminal nuisance, endangering others, criminal trespass, criminal tampering, and disorderly conduct. Right? Was arrested at the scene. He has 3 prior arrests, 2 for drug possession and 1 for public intoxication. Says that he may have tried to set the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center on fire. And was arraigned on supervised release. Which means he is supposed to report to a person who will report back to the court as early as Thursday. So, the guy's out. Almost immediately.
Right.
After committing arson.
Yeah, arson's a bad charge.
Arson is one of just a small handful, right? Arson, kidnap, murder doesn't go straight to federal. Arson does. Kidnapping. Certain types of terroristic threats, terrorism, etc. Arson's on the very short list of things that go straight to federal jurisdiction. And there's some crookedness in there. There's some reasonableness in there. There's a lot we've talked about it before. There's a lot tied up in there where arson tends to be related to organized crime because actual firebugs don't last very long. Very, very good firebugs get contracts.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the thing where, as far as like the people that study the criminal mind, there's typically not a lot of separation between your serial killer. There's like a lot of, and even that, I'm not real sure how I feel about it because, well, okay, your brain is similar to a serial killer. You're not a serial killer, but your brain is similar to one, so we're going to treat you like a serial killer. That's one of those things where I understand and I get it, but I'm also like, but wait a minute, we're going to treat them like a serial killer, even though they're not a serial killer.
Well,
but I'm not trying to even go down that particular rabbit hole. It's just there's a lot going on. Like, as far as dodging consequences go, like if you're charged with arson
and released immediately, let's not mix any bones about it. He was released immediately on his own recognizance, basically. Okay, court supervisor. Because he attacked a conservative icon in New York City.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the assumption can be made that if he lit the right Christmas tree on fire. Like that's the problem, is that he lit the right Christmas tree on fire. And yeah, it goes back to, and we've been saying for a long time on this show, the whole thing about how...
Real quick, Waller, I don't do pesos. You can't buy anything with them.
Well, you can if you have enough of them. You
yes,
bring
but
I
would have to I would have to borrow my father's wheelbarrow, and I'm afraid it has a flat tire.
Anyhow, it goes back to how we've talked about on this show many times. Like, there's the whole thing about when Richard Spencer got punched in the face unprovoked.
And endorsed Joe Biden for president.
No, that's not where I was going. But it's the whole thing about how, oh yeah, totally, let's punch Nazis. Let's punch Nazis. So you're allowed to commit violence.
Yeah, it's okay to attack people you don't like if you have the correct think.
Yes, yeah. And so this guy lights the Christmas tree on fire and gets to get out on bond or bail or whatever because, well, he has the right think, apparently. We get it. No, bad boy, you should not have lit that Christmas tree on fire. That was terrible. But gosh, we totally understand why you would light the Fox News Christmas tree on fire. We totally get that. Right? So...
And then... Oh, Stryker, apparently nobody paid the bond. He was arraigned on court's supervision.
No, there would have been some kind of a bond. Just because the article doesn't say
Fair enough. So, and we've got, the Jussie Smollett case, the Juicy Smollett case just wrapped up yesterday. It says, although prosecutors said there was overwhelming evidence that Juicy Smollett staged an assault on himself in late January 2019. Okay, look. The only evidence that has been presented that suggests that he was attacked is his direct testimony. The counter evidence, both of the attackers, the Osundaro brothers, with whom he has had sexual relationships, according to their testimony,
at least one of them,
testified that he not only did he pay them to conduct the attack, plan the whole thing, but they both testified that he even had them rehearse it. And just in case anybody's uncertain about whether or not they're fabricating that, they filmed that, and the video of them rehearsing the faked attack with him was a piece of evidence presented at the trial. There's zero reasonable doubt that Juicy did this on purpose with absolute malice aforethought, right? No reasonable person believed that he was legitimately attacked within the first week that it occurred. As soon as it happened, and he said, I was in the one of the least inhabited, worst sections of Chicago at 2:00 in the morning, in the middle of one of the worst polar vortexes and lowest temperatures in living memory, at 2:00 in the morning, and was recognized as the actor from whatever that show is,
Empire,
mm-hmm. by a couple of homophobic, racist white supremacists who happened to be armed with a bottle of bleach and a new... If you thought for a half a second that the series of events described by the original claims of Jussie Smollett could occur in reality, you weren't ready to vote last year. You were too dumb to vote last year. And I'll take that one step further. I guarantee that if you were at that level of too dumb to vote, you mailed one in.
Well, look, to be fair, first of all, apparently it wasn't a Subway sandwich Jussie was going for.
It was eggs.
It was eggs.
Yes.
But here's the
thing.
At
2 a.m, he was counseled by his fitness coach to go get eggs from the drugstore, which turned out to be closed. It's 2:00 in the morning, dumbass. You didn't think the store would be open. Not that store. You did not believe that store would be open.
Yeah, John Ward did an absolutely fantastic parody video when this happened that really broke down, before we even had any of the all of these sorts of facts come out. Like John Ward did a fantastic video, very sarcastically breaking down just the absolute amazing confluence of events that would have to happen in order for Jesse's story to be true. And one of the things that Actual Justice Warrior has pointed out on his channel multiple times in regard to this, and it's true. I barely even knew the show Empire existed.
Right.
And the only reason I knew it existed is because it starred Terrence Howard, and it was unrelated news about Terrence Howard that made me aware of the fact that the show Empire existed. Outside of that, I had no clue. So the fact that, you know, some super racist magateers, like, I've never seen an episode of Empire.
Right.
I will probably never see an episode of Empire. And if you like Empire, this is not a knock on it. I'm just saying, I think if we're, you know what, if we're willing to make assumptions about race and culture, you could just assume that guys like Chris and I have not and will not see Empire. So the thought that, like, super racist versions of Chris and I saw Empire and was like, hey, it's that Empire guy. Let's go beat him up. In Chicago, a notoriously left-wing area. You want to talk about, like, you know, there's no blue states, there's red states with blue cancers. Like, Chicago is one of the top 10 blue cancers in the country. And that's where Trump supporters live?
Some of the blue cancers are easily excised topical melanomas. Chicago is what Walter White had.
Well, I mean, Chicago has this, like, long, bizarre history. Like, it's the place where Al Capone just kind of walked around free for years. Everybody knew he was Al Capone.
Yep.
Like, there was no question about, like, everything. But, you know what? He did the thing that a lot of Democrats do. Like, he ran soup kitchens. Like, he gave people free stuff.
Yeah.
So they let him get away with crimes.
Yeah,
and
well, that's how most of South America works, right? You know, you think about drug cartels, they're not hiding down there, right? The local drug boss, he's got a great big house, beautiful house, and the nearby community, like, half of them work for him, and they're not out slinging coke and trying to hook people. No, they're farmers. It's just that the thing they're farming is cocaine or marijuana, and, like, they don't have livelihoods without him there. And then he's Mr. Give Back to the community, and they love him, right? That's a lot of your big bosses when you talk about that kind of stuff. And same thing with Capone. I mean,
look, but to be fair though, I think Jussie Smollett, like, he's gonna have consequences. Like, they're coming. It's just a matter of to what degree at this point. I mean, I know you said in our pre-show setup that, well, the jury's still deliberating. I don't actually have a problem with that. Like, let the jury deliberate. He does have 6 felonies that they need to go through. You don't want to create a situation where everybody, you know, walks into the room and says, well, what is it, 4:30? I got to have that Stouffer's lasagna in the oven by 5:45 to have it ready by 7. So guilty. All right, guilty. Let's go. Like, that's...
No. That Stouffer's lasagna takes 2 hours. And then you have to take the cover back off and put it in for another 15 minutes, and then you have to let it sit for 20 minutes. You can't do it that fast.
Yeah, okay, fine. But the point, but the point is the fact that they're actually taking the time to go through, because, what I'm saying is he's charged with 6 felonies. So what they're doing is, instead of doing a quick throwaway deliberation on all 6 at once, they're taking them each one at a time and deliberating on them one at a time. So even if you assume that it's a couple hours per felony charge, that's still 8, 10, 12, 14 hours for them to deliberate on all 6 charges. And then there's the matter of, you know, what should the penalty be? Like, it's different from state to state, and I don't know how it works in Illinois. But in a lot of states, the jury even gets to have some kind of a say in what sort of punishment you get if you're found guilty. So, there's a lot for them to talk about. There really is. And if I was on this jury, I would think that Jussie was guilty. But we talked about before, I would also have a problem with the fact that he's already forfeited a bond. And to a guy like him, $10,000 is nothing. It's like $100 to you and I, right? It's money you don't want to spend, but it's not going to make it impossible for you to pay your bills. However, he did already forfeit a $10,000 bond. So at least in my mind, if the justice system is going to work the way that it's supposed to work, that would be a thing that would be in the back of my mind, that even if it's a relatively small penalty, he's already paid some penalty for these crimes. Now, is that enough of a penalty? No. Like, he tried to incite a race war. It's hard to imagine what too much penalty would be for that. Like, you tried to start a war. Like, you tried to start a civil war. That's bad. Okay?
And let's not forget, he's been walking free. After having done this, it's been almost 3 years.
But it's still forfeited that $10,000 bond, though. Like, that's no, in the grand scheme of things, that's no chump change. Like, if somebody offered me $10,000, I could think of a few useful things to do with that amount of money. It wouldn't exactly be life-changing money, but it would certainly, it would come close to being life-changing money.
Jamie asks, wasn't it dismissed and then reinstated? I'm not going to relitigate all of that. There was a lot of corruption involved in this case.
It wasn't dismissed. What happened is he worked out a deal with the prosecution, and this is one of the things that we talked about on the show, where the prosecution said, okay, do community service. I forget the exact length of time. Yeah, do community service, forfeit this $10,000 bond, and what we will do is decline to prosecute. And just to be clear, if you're ever in any type of legal jeopardy, whether or not you're guilty or innocent, if the prosecution says, okay, here's the deal, do X and we will decline to prosecute, you do X. Like, because then they're going to decline to prosecute. Like, it is what it is.
The downside to that, you get all of that in writing.
I mean, apparently he had it in writing.
Because they declined to prosecute, and here we are.
Well, that's because a special counsel came in behind the prosecutor. And that's another thing that we talked about as all this is developed, that if this whole deal was so dirty that a special prosecutor had to come in and basically undo what the previous attorneys had already worked out, then some of those attorneys need to be facing criminal sanctions.
Yes.
Okay? Like, if this was that bad of a deal, then you don't blame Jussie for taking the deal. You blame the prosecutor for offering it to him. Like, it's...
Now, okay, and we've spent a little more time talking about the case itself than the things that I really wanted to make the point about here. So, on the Smollett case, like I said, you'd have to be, you'd have to be just dumb as a box of rocks from the very beginning to have believed the story that Smollett told, and the entire media complex, with the exception of Fox News and even some of their personalities, they loved this story. They were thrilled to have this story to tell, and they were 100% on board. Right? Now, you look, this is where I get to tie that back into the situation with Waukesha and the kid whose parents are being charged with
involuntary
manslaughter, right? So this kid, he's immediately labeled a terrorist. There's, apart from his mother being a Republican, apparently, there's nothing.
You mean the school shooter?
Yeah, the school shooter.
Okay.
So apparently his mother's a Republican, but what we don't have on this kid is like a tirade on social media just pages and pages and pages of not just active racism, but actually saying, I want to cause the deaths of these people because of their race and my political views. You do have that with the Waukesha shooter, but he's dropped out of the headlines, and they just absolutely will not call him a terrorist. Where he is, as we've talked about on this show before, obviously, by definition, a terrorist. And this difference, guys, this is incredibly dangerous. This is exactly the kind of thing that I've talked about in the past, where I've talked about the importance of the First Amendment in this country and how other countries don't have it. Canada is one of my favorite examples because it's such a it's so severely stark a difference. In Canada, because of the structure of the hate speech laws, it is the case that after a single election, what is hate speech can just suddenly be 180 degrees opposite what it was prior to the same election. So if you've got a left-wing government in place now, you put these in terms that Americans can understand within American politics, it would be as if while the Democrats are in office, it is hate speech to say that a baby is a life, that life begins at conception. And then, as soon as, and understand, when I say hate speech in this context, talking about Canadian laws, in Canada, hate speech is a crime for which you can be fined and spend time in jail.
For jokes.
For jokes.
Things we say on this show, yeah.
Absolutely.
That'd be a big fat negative.
Because of the way that those laws are written, if the next term the Conservatives were in charge, then suddenly it would be hate speech to say that a woman has a right to make choices for her own body. Right? Now, I think, obviously I'm the pro-life guy, and that whole argument that a woman has rights to make choices for her own body ignores the fact that the child is also a life. So,
and that in 99% of cases, she made the choice that got her pregnant.
Right.
You gotta have consent. Gotta have consent. Okay, I got it.
But what I'm getting to there is, I would never want to see somebody charged with the crime, especially a crime that is called hate speech, fined and incarcerated for disagreeing over whether or not they should be allowed to kill their babies. Now, I'd be totally fine with seeing people who murder their children incarcerated and even executed for the crime of murdering children, because I like children.
But talking about it is not the same thing as doing it. That whole thing about speech is violence is bullshit, and it's dangerous bullshit. There's a little bit of this that I'm going to push back on. It's not that the left is immune to consequences. It's that there are certain people in power who are mostly immune to consequences. We didn't pay as much attention to the chat as normal, but they brought up Ghislaine. Is it Ghislaine or Ghislaine?
It's Ghislaine.
All right, and they brought up.
It may be Ghislaine.
I don't know, but
it's French. That's not one of my languages.
Anyhow, they brought up Maxwell, and saying that she's going to walk. I don't think Maxwell is going to walk. Not at all. Now, what I do think is going to happen is that Maxwell is going to get found guilty, and but she's going to have a very, very narrow, restricted guilt. And it's going to be in such a way where it's like, hey, your boy Epstein was going to give us a bunch of names and get a really sweet plea deal. Yeah, we're not going to do that with you. We're just going to find you guilty and then give you the absolute minimum sentence possible, and you shut your mouth, because it would look really suspicious if both of you committed suicide in maximum security prison cells. And so it's more about, are you useful to the oligarchy? Because Harvey Weinstein, for a long time, I mean, let's face it, he helped make a lot of lefties a lot of money.
Yeah.
But he finally took things to the point to where the evidence was absolutely overwhelming, And what has a tendency to happen is when one progressive idea crashes into another progressive idea, one of them has to win out. Were it not for the Me Too movement and its efforts to destroy Donald Trump and that whole hashtag Me Too, Harvey Weinstein would still be Harvey Weinsteinin. Like, that would be a thing. But but because the left had an agenda, the progressives, the people in power, however you want to call them, because they had an agenda, and that Me Too movement was part of the agenda, Weinstein had to go, got thrown overboard. So no consequences. Like, there are consequences, like the Christmas tree guy. Like, he's been charged with arson. There's going to be consequences. They might not be enough. They might not be fair. They might be half of what you or I would get if we committed the exact same crime. But there's going to be consequences. It's about how useful are you?
No. So he was charged.
Uh-huh.
He was released.
Uh-huh.
Does that not sound familiar? Like an entire year of BLM protests where they destroyed billions of dollars of property, murdered dozens of civilians and police officers.
Yeah, but most of them haven't been charged.
Most of them haven't been arrested or most of them were released, and where there were charges, those charges have been dropped.
Yeah, exactly.
So this guy being charged and then having those charges dropped, it will not surprise me if his charges are dropped.
No, dude set a Christmas tree on fire. His charges are not going to get dropped, man. That's not going to happen. He's not operating under the rubric of BLM. Okay, it's not the same thing.
All he's got to do is put that fist up.
Okay, we'll see. But I mean, there's going to be some consequences for this guy. This is not the same thing as the fiery, mostly peaceful protests. I mean, that's not to say that I don't understand the analogy that you're drawing. I even agree with it. I'm just saying, as far as results are concerned, this is not going to be the same thing.
The only thing that's going to keep this guy from getting off scot-free is that he didn't have a contingent of violent actors with him. That's the best you can hope for. But it is after 8 o'clock. I've got contracts today, and I will see you tomorrow.
Mañana.
I almost hit the wrong button. It's that one.